Ladies and gentlemen, I'm calling to order the meeting of the Oakville Public Library Board for Thursday, April 20th, 2023. I'd like to first say I apologize. The meeting is starting late this evening. I was held up on the highway, and we don't have a vice chair, which hopefully will resolve tonight. Before we actually get into the business of the meeting, I want to read our land acknowledgement. The Oakville Public Library is situated on the Treaty Number 14 and Treaty Number 22 treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat and the Haudenosaunee. Oakville is currently home to many different First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. Regardless of where we come from, we are all interconnected through the land we live on, the water that we use, and the air that we breathe. We are committed to a continuous learning journey in allyship. We seek to elevate Indigenous voices and lived experience to cultivate reconciliation in Oakville. Members of the board, are there any, Madam Committee Secretary, are there any regrets?
We have regrets from Councillor Chisholm.
Okay. Members of the board, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? I'm not seeing any, thank you. We have our regular minutes of the meeting circulated from our March 16th meeting. I assume everybody's had an opportunity to review them. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes as circulated? Thanks, Bill. I don't remember your name. Avis, thank you. Seconded by Avis. Seconded by Bill's neighbor. Seconded by Avis, thank you very much. Are there any questions, errors, or omissions on the minutes? I'm not seeing any. So all in favor? Those are carried, thank you. Before we actually get into the consent items, I just realized that we have some members of the board who have joined us for the first time tonight. So let's take a moment and just go around the table and introduce ourselves. I know we did that last month. So if you gave a long introduction last month, just give an abbreviated one tonight. If you're new tonight, give us a little bit more of an introduction of who you are and where you come from. We appreciate that. Let's start down at the end with Bill. Who are you and where do you come from? Don't forget to don't forget to turn your microphones. Turn your mic.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No problem. Right hand button. There you go.
So yeah, I'm Bill Smith, and I've been on this board for, I don't know, probably 5 years now, something like that. 8? Whatever. So, as I was mentioning to some of you guys, I've been involved in quite a few committees and boards around town, and this is a great board, and I'm happy to have all you guys on board, so welcome.
Thanks, Bill. Avis?
So, Avis Bahar, I joined the board effective last month. I been an Oakville resident since 2005 and have been involved in community organizations and on board in a board capacity, including United Way of Oakville, Oakville Green, more currently, as well as Clean Health in the past.
Thanks, Avis.
Excited
Welcome.
to be here.
Yeah, welcome. We're excited to have you here.
Rod Sawyer, I'm a new board member for this term, very excited to be here. I retired from the Ontario government in 2019, managed to get my retirement party in just ahead of the COVID, and delighted to be on this board. At the Ontario government, I worked at the Ministry of Culture, where I was lead for the Public Libraries Act, lead for the Ontario Public Library Statistics. I worked with libraries across the province on broadband, way back public internet access when that was new, a whole bunch of other issues and exciting opportunities, and love everything Oakville Public Library does, including seed libraries, which were discussed at the last meeting. So I'm really looking forward to working with everybody, and I think like Avis, I go to the Woodside branch.
Nice. Welcome, Rod. Look forward to working with you for the next 4 years.
I'm Rebecca Mayville. This is my first meeting. I'm very excited to be here. I work in marketing. I've lived in Oakville since 2001. I'm raising 2 boys here who love the library almost as much as I do. No, I love it the most. It's not even a competition, and I just really love Oakville, and I'm so happy to be here and working on this board for something that I care about a lot.
Do you have a home branch?
Iroquois Ridge.
Iroquois Ridge. Okay, thank you.
Celso Mello. This is also my second meeting. I've been a Oakville resident for the last 20 years. I am an IT executive, have been, it's for longer than I remember now. And Iroquois Ridge is also my go-to place, and have been for the last few years. very happy to be here.
Welcome back.
My name is Meredith Burke, and I have been on the board for a little under a year. I'm a Senior Director of Resource Development at United Way Halton and Hamilton. I grew up in Oakville and continue to live here. I have 2 school-age children now that I'm raising here as well. My home branch is White Oaks Branch, which is also my alma mater high school.
Very good.
Andrew?
Andrew Cashman. I lead a team of marketing managers professionally, and I've been a resident of Oakville for about 8 years. This is my second term on the board that I'm commencing now. Absolutely love the board. It's a fun place to be, a great group of people here, and I'm a devoted patron of Woodside Branch also.
So, counting up the score, I think we're Woodside's in the lead tonight, so. Oh, I forgot to record yours. Oh, actually, no, then it's a tie. Because I'm White Oaks. Yeah, so it's 33. That's cool. Okay, members of the board, we have to turn to our consent items. We have 2 items on that consent agenda this evening. Would anybody like to separate either of those items or both of those items? Or are you satisfied to move them as is? Thank you, Andrew. 4.1, which is the Oakville Public Library key agenda items, and 4.2, which is the health and safety report, have been moved by Andrew and seconded by Rebecca, right? Yes. Okay. Last chance for comments or questions? All in favor? And that is carried. Okay, there are no confidential consent items tonight. There's a confidential discussion item. We'll deal with that later. We move on to the year-to-date financial status indicators. Tara.
Yes, good evening. So for the new board members, we provide financial updates frequently. Next month, you'll see a much more detailed financial report coming to you. For this term of the board, we shifted our board meetings from the 4th to the 3rd, which has actually shifted some of the way we're scheduling our financial reporting, simply because of how it works in terms of month's end. So just as a reminder for some of the old board meetings, the old board members, that there is a slight shift in when you can expect the different types of financial reports. But what we have before you is our year-to-date financial status indicators as of the end of February. Really highlights where we are with our spending in terms of our actuals versus our budget. Everything is on schedule so far based on the February dates to it. You will notice that in some of our spending, it's not always clean from quarter to quarter, particularly around items like collections, where we do ordering, and we order more in certain quarters just because when books are released and how the publishing schedule kind of works. So it's not necessarily going to be, this is our budget, this is that. As we go through the different quarters, there will be some different shifts with the goal that by the end of the year, everything is on par and on target. Anyway, I'm happy to entertain any questions that the board has on the report.
Members of the board, any questions on the year-to-dates? Bill? And then we'll go to Salso.
Yeah, I just had one question about the purchased services spending. So I see that's basically almost, I don't know, it's hard to say, is it doubled over the same period last year? And, you know, quite a bit over the previous year. Is that something that's just a, you know, just a quarterly thing, or is that an area that's, you know, wildly going up?
I think we've shifted some of how we're doing it. So we've done more training at the beginning part of the year than we have done. Sometimes that training happens at the beginning of the year, but there were training things that we wanted to do last year that we didn't get a chance to do, so we scheduled it for earlier in the year, so that's some of it as well. There are some facilities contracted services that we're doing more upfront, kind of proactively than responsively. So those are kind of the key drivers of that.
Right, okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Salso?
Yeah. Yes, also on purchase services. So it's clear that personnel costs are under, and you said that it's because of some staff vacancies that you have. Are we using purchase services to make up for personnel shortages?
Sorry?
You understand the question? So you're under on staffing.
Yes.
Are we purchasing labor in order
Yep.
to make up for that staffing shortage?
Not at this point in the budget. I mean, what this is showing right now is where we were budgeted versus where we are in actuals. So throughout the year, we may be spending more, but over the full year, we'll be within that area's budget.
Right, but for the year to date, so the 2 months
Yeah.
in the year, are we over on purchasing partially because we're purchasing labor?
No. No, because purchase services would not be included in that line if we were, so where we have vacancies and we're filling shifts, that's filled out of a personnel line. It doesn't
Oh,
come
it
out the
doesn't go to
purchase.
purchase?
No.
Okay,
No.
okay. And one more question, if I may. So I look at a 3-year analysis, and for personnel costs, it's sort of going up on a small slope trend, which is consistent to inflationary increases. However, there's a huge jump from 2000, the last year to this year, right? Because it was like in the 1.2 million ballpark, and the budget for this year, personnel costs is 1.4 million, unless I'm reading this wrong.
So some of that would be directly related to the joint job evaluation process that we did last year. So we were unionized in 2018. And as part of that unionization, we agreed to do a full joint job evaluation of all unionized positions. We completed that last year, and a lot of that is a result of, I think there was 4 or 5 positions that jumped, at least 2 of which significantly. So that actually drove the majority of that.
Yeah, okay, because that is like 15% increase year over year, although you're not quite there on the actual side of things, right? So has that materialized? Is it going to materialize later in the year?
Yeah, I think some of it is also being balanced out by the fact that we have a number of full-time vacancies. So you're not going to be able to see those kind of line up until we fill them. There are a number of positions that we're actively recruiting for right now, as well as what continues to be one of our challenges, and it's admittedly a good problem to have, is that we'll have positions, a full-time position open up, a part-timer move into it, and then there's an act where that person moves and then that person moves, which creates the gapping that you're seeing.
Yeah, it's lumpy, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Further questions? Go ahead. Avis.
Just, you've talked about the, I guess, the timing difference on materials and supplies budget to actuals. When you set the budget for the materials, do you also reflect seasonality in that budget? So meaning like every year, if you have the releases happening pretty much the same, do you set the budget, is it different from quarter to quarter, or is it?
Yeah, so we do know throughout the year when, especially for collections, we know when the key areas are. It's always big in the spring, and it's always big in the fall.
Right.
So we know that, and they do the purchasing based on those.
Okay, so this was just above and beyond what the normal seasonality?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Avis. I do have one question, I think one, maybe 2. The first one is with respect to the specific 2022 Story Walk grant that hasn't materialized, which is impacting our revenue to date. Is that anticipated to be received at some point?
I don't think we've applied to another Story Walk grant. That was the Healthy Communities grant through OCF. And so that we haven't applied for that purpose. What we used that grant for in the past was actually to establish the infrastructure. So now the infrastructure is in place. We don't necessarily need the grant to be able to print the sheets quarterly to be replaced.
So I guess the reason I'm asking the question is because it said that revenues are showing lower in 2023 due to a specific grant for 2022 Story Walks. So I'm just trying to understand why the actuals are lower than budgeted. Would you have budgeted for that 2022 Story Walk grant? I'm trying to understand the reduction in revenue, and here it's explaining that revenues are lower because of that Story Walk grant.
No, yeah, I'm not actually entirely sure. Belinda, do you know, or can we follow up later? Sorry, Belinda, who is our senior financial analyst, is on the call.
I was going to say, I don't know who you're talking to.
I am here, I can answer.
Thank you.
So the last last year we received that, so it was in the actuals. So you're looking at the actuals right now, and we did receive that grant last year. And because the revenues are such a small number, it is showing as a little bit higher because of that grant. We used that money last year. It is not coming into 2023.
Okay.
So that's why. But the revenues for the library are so little that grant stuck out a bit last year because it was about 24,000.
Okay.
I get it.
I guess when the numbers are small, it always looks like it's substantial. Second question is, the province announced a minimum wage increase this October. Will that have an impact on us in any way?
Oh, yeah, we didn't, that wasn't budgeted
Yeah.
for in this year.
Yeah, I don't think most businesses budgeted for it either this year, but.
No, I don't think anybody did. Now, I'm not overly concerned because Belinda and I have already had some couple conversations, and we know that we're likely to run a surplus that will cover that this year, but it'll definitely be included in the 2024 budget.
What will cover it this year?
The surplus.
Gapping?
The gapping.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, I'll come back to you once more for any further comments or questions on the year-to-date financial reports. Not seeing any. So the recommendation here is receive for information, which there's really no action except receiving it. Can I get that motion to receive, please? Celso, and thank you to Rod. Remember, learning everybody's names. Thank you. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you so much. Okay, let's move on to our next agenda item, which is a 6.2, the political use of space policy.
So this report comes to you as a proactive measure, anticipating potential issues coming from our Pride Month programming. And as lessons learned and best practices from libraries throughout Canada and the US and what they're encountering right now in terms of pushback of particularly to us LGBTQ plus programming, but also does align with other diverse programming that's getting offered throughout. As I mentioned in here, Calgary is probably the most public at the moment, and the struggles that they've been having throughout this year with weekly protests, causing them to have to temporarily postpone their drag queen story time, or reading with royalty, I think is what they call it, program that has since restarted, but they rejigged a number of their policies. You may have also seen that the municipality of Calgary introduced a bylaw that is quite controversial related to that. So I sit on the Canadian Urban Library Council, and we have a listserv, and so this has been a topic of discussion across the entire country, and a number of us are moving to review our policies in advance and just kind of strengthen the language to provide clarity not only to our customers, but our staff, so that if these incidents do occur, we have very clear lines about what is a welcome democratic protest and where the line is where we have to get potentially other members involved with that. So we started with what was our election-related resources policy and fleshed that out a bit more, and are recommending an update to political use of space and resources policy to cover it a bit more broadly, as well as updates to our customer code of conduct policy. We just didn't feel it was as direct as it could be to address these issues that, given conversations that have already started to occur here in Oakville with us, could be quite contentious as we get closer to June.
Oh boy, okay. Members of the board, questions, comments? Celso?
So on the political use of space, the second page has a statement about elected officials not being able to use the space for a number of activities. That's very clear. But there's a carve-out. Unless they're part of a shared library program. What would that be?
So we do work with a number of different partners, Acclaim Health, Halton Environmental Network, Autism, Oakville. There's all kinds, and of course my mind kind of blanks. Or we do joint programming. So a lot of times but there is, which is also, I think, in here, like our partnership policy, so that's part of that and governed by that obviously organizations that we work with, we have interconnected us in terms of our vision and values, but that's what that refers to.
Okay, thank you.
Further comments or questions? Bill?
This idea of the point about posting or distributing partisan campaign or election material in libraries or library property is not prohibited or permitted. I was just wondering, I was sort of thinking about the libraries around town and what have you. What would you define as the library property? Like, take Central, for instance.
Yep.
Where would the library property start?
It's a complicated question. So technically, our facilities are all owned by the municipality, which is why that is actually wording that matches the municipality.
Yeah.
But technically, inside our walls, our policies and procedures rule. But the minute somebody steps outside, so for example, Centennial Square upstairs, or the parking lot, those are town-owned. So at that point, their bylaws would be in place. So if somebody wanted to protest or do a demonstration on Centennial Square, that would be a town issue. If it's happening inside of Central,
Okay.
that is a library and town issue.
So they could protest right at the door, basically?
Correct.
Wow, okay.
There's not a lot you can do about that in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
No.
Yeah. Further comments or questions? Okay, I have one.
Okay.
Sorry if it sounds a little self-serving, but I am an elected official. So this policy with respect to not posting materials, et cetera, and that includes elected officials. I understand candidates for political office, but I mean, as town councillors, this is pretty restrictive in terms of the ability of a town councillor to put, say, for example, their ward newsletter in their local library, or to host a community meeting in one of the public spaces. So that concerns me a little bit, because it seems a very broad stroke against, because that would even impact like members of parliament who want to hold, roundtables on issues of the day. So was that the intention?
Posting industry project, no, it's more along the lines of somebody can't come in and start campaigning on and handing out things, as well as our poster boards. So nothing can be posted. We do not put political or partisan things up on our community boards.
Right.
And that we do not, somebody wants somebody to come in and start handing out pamphlets.
So I understand that, but let me give you an example. And let's use a member of parliament, for example, and take me off the map. If a member of parliament wanted to hold a passport workshop and hand out materials on getting a passport, that's not political material. That's part of
Correct.
That's part of the job. So, but this could be interpreted as being that, because it doesn't make the distinction between elected officials and candidates.
So maybe
I mean,
that's what we can do.
Yeah, because as part of my job as
Yeah.
a councillor and a member of parliament or member of provincial parliament, it is advancing issues that the government that they are working with or representing. Sometimes you have to be able to have those opportunities to advocate. And I think we're losing a big opportunity to rent space to our MPs and MPPs as well.
No, you're correct. And we do use registered candidates language in some of the other sections, so we
Right.
can frame it to be like, during an election, that's a different kind of perspective than an elected
And I think
official.
that's always the way it's been,
Yeah.
is that when an election is, because I know that's the town rule.
Yeah.
We can't, as candidates, use anything in the building, and we have to, Jessica will chase us down the street if we try to show up on the property, even with a sign in our window, let alone using the facilities. Maybe not Jessica, she's very nice. But I think that there needs to be a clear delineation between those that are elected and doing the work of the people.
Right.
And the government that they represent needs to be not restricted, I don't think.
Okay.
Because it's not really, if I'm talking about, a building that's being proposed in a neighborhood, is that political? Or is that doing my job and bringing information to the community? So if you could maybe work on
Clarify.
that a little bit?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, absolutely.
So after that, are there further questions or comments? Yes. Meredith.
I wanted to bring it back. You started by talking about Pride Month. And first of all, I wanted to commend you for this proactive activity to prepare for Pride Month. And for the way I read the customer code of conduct, it seems very clear as far as what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. So I don't have any issue with the policy as it's written. I just can't help but wonder, do you feel that the staff has enough resources to enforce this customer code of conduct should issues arise?
Yeah, so that's also a lot of conversation that's happening now. I mean, the policy is one thing, but once this policy is after the feedback given today, Jennifer and I are working closely with the managers and the staff to develop procedures. And really, what are the procedures that need to be in place? What procedures do we have in place that may need to be beefed up? We're also having conversations with our employee resource group on diversity and equity and inclusion to talk about what are the speaking points and the information that the staff need in order to deal with some of these pieces. Because this will take a lot of different forms. And it could be something as direct as an actual protest or demonstration, or it could be somebody coming in and asking why taxpayer dollars are being spent on a drag queen story time. And is that appropriate? And so giving staff that starting point, obviously if it escalates, that gets moved up all the way up to myself, potentially even to the board. But that is the other stream, I guess, that we are currently working on, is making sure that staff feel empowered and informed. Also making sure that we have a very clear understanding of the schedule of events, and having conversations about what we think the risk is. We've already had conversations with communication at the town and municipal enforcement at the town, just making sure that everybody is aware of what we're doing, what the town is doing, what other organizations are doing, in order to make sure everybody is prepared should events occur.
I can just add that generally speaking, Oakville's been very accepting of these sorts of activities, both at Town Hall and other places. So we haven't had a lot of incidents to a large extent. There's been a few.
There's been a few. I would say last year, the last year, I got the most calls, emails, and staff pressure, in that people went in and talked to staff, that we've ever seen.
Yeah.
So it will be interesting to see this year.
Yeah, I'm mostly referring to like demonstrations or things
Oh,
that
yes.
show up on property.
Yeah.
No, I got lots of emails about stories for
Yeah.
drag queens myself. So I know that there's certainly vocal people, but we don't really, Oakville's a fairly genteel place, fortunately, so we don't get a lot of that. It's not like we're Florida or Orlando, right, with the governor coming after us or something. So we have sort of a charmed existence. Hopefully I haven't just jinxed it.
I will also just say that our Pride events will be broader than Drag Queen Storytime this year.
Yeah. I do have a question. Have you spoken to Holt Regional Police about these issues before?
Not yet, but we will be.
Yeah, I would recommend speaking to
Yeah.
the Community Mobilization Bureau and just making sure that they know when you're having these sorts of events, because wearing my other hat, I do know that we have an uptick in hate-related crimes. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe that of the 42 hate-related crimes in 2022, the vast majority of them were related to LGBTQ plus community. And so it's, I think it's important maybe to have that conversation with Sergeant Ryan Smith, who'll be your guy.
Absolutely.
At the CMB at 2 District.
Yeah, no one will.
Okay. He just got transferred there, so.
Oh, so he's no longer, okay, because I used to talk to him.
Yeah, I think he's doing dual
both?
role right now, but
Okay.
he'll be taking over that role at 2 District. So we're very lucky to have him in Oakville. He comes with that EDI experience, so it'll be fantastic.
Yes,
Yeah.
yep.
Okay, members of the board, you've heard the report, and the recommendation is to receive the report for feedback. Oh, yes, sorry.
Still talk about the customer code of conduct, or is that, I think we've done a couple of different ones.
So we've only right now dealt with the political use of space policy. So I don't think that.
But they're both in the same report.
Are they?
Yeah.
I apologize. I guess I didn't read far enough.
Yeah. No, in
I am so
retrospect, I
sorry,
could have
yes.
titled that better, but.
Thank you. You have the floor, sir.
I hate to be a stickler for wording sometimes, but I love these bullets, the new customer code of conduct policy, the yellow highlighted ones. But I just want to draw your attention to one thing. The preamble says, when accessing and so on, we ask that you. And then it goes on to give a lot of action verbs, which all make sense. But the second and third ones down on page 34 are actually more like statements. So they don't really flow from that. And what I'm suggesting is, for the bullet that starts with respect diversity, you could say at the end of it, you could say further to this. And then the next two, which begin with abusive, harassing conduct that is disruptive, you would indent them one in each so that they actually flow, or else really everything should have an action verb, because you're saying at the top, we ask that you. and then you've got abusive, harassing, and violent behavior is not permitted. It doesn't really follow that way. The way I'm suggesting it is stick in a little further to this at the end of the first one, indent the next two. There are other ways to handle this, of course, and I guess we could sit here and talk about them, but that's my suggestion.
Sounds like a good
So
suggestion.
adding at the end of respect diversity, which includes spirituality and values, and then, sorry, it's hard for me to hear.
Oh, sorry.
You have your mic on, right? Yes, you do.
Yeah, maybe I need to sit closer to it. Okay, so what I'm suggesting is, for that bullet that says respect, diversity, and so on, and ends with and values, you would keep the period there and you'd say further to this, colon, all right? And then the next two, which begin abusive, comma, harassing, and the next one that says conduct is disruptive, just indent them one in, and you've got that covered. Otherwise, you need to figure out
How to make those active
action
verbs?
verbs for those two as well, which would be difficult.
Okay. Okay.
Seems like good feedback.
Yep.
And now I really miss Steve Bright. Steve Bright used to be the guy that did this, so now we have Rod who's taking Steve's responsibilities, so thank you for that. Go for it, Councilor Selson.
So on that vein, so the current policy is dated April 22nd, 2021, right?
Yes.
And the updated one supersedes, so this is the block at the top. It supersedes the one dated November 23rd, 2017, but it's now going to supersede the one that dated April 22nd, 2021.
Correct.
So that needs to be added in there, right?
It will, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Also, anything further? So for clarification, especially for the new folks, so you'll go back, these will be redrafted, and they'll come back to the board because you've provided feedback, so they'll come back in final form or proposed form for final consideration, correct?
Yeah.
So we're just receiving tonight, we're not approving, so we've just sent back some good feedback and look forward to seeing what comes out of it. And perhaps you could redline the changes, I don't know if we've asked.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Can I get a motion to receive this item, please? Thank you, Rod, thank you, and seconded by Bill. I know your name. All in favor? And that's carried, thank you. Okay, let's move along to digital content landscape. This is what we requested last month, I guess, right? Yeah, so this is the, just a little bit of a precursor. This has been, you probably are aware of this, being involved in the library sector at Queen's Park, but this has been an ongoing challenge that libraries are having in the new era. And I'm anxious to hear what the update is, if there is any, so take it away.
I'm going to give a little bit of an update, but I did write this report just to kind of summarize. I'm also going to go through a digital content presentation that was provided at the Ontario Library Association Super Conference in January by the Digital Content Working Group, which is a group of staff from libraries across the country whose job it is to really monitor what's happening. We're going to talk a little bit what's happening in the US and lessons that we're learning and potential legislative changes that we can advocate for moving forward. But I did kind of give you a high-level it's a complex issue, but I tried to do my best into summarizing it into just a couple of pages. And you're gonna have to bear with me. Whereas I'm very aware of these topics, I'm not embedded in them in the same way this team is. So they were gracious enough to send their presentation and their notes. So I'm gonna do a lot of reading. And if you have any super detailed questions, I can absolutely get those answers for you. Hopefully I can answer them myself, but just, I don't normally read so much as I'm about to. So the Digital Content Working Group has been working together on digital content licensing and access issues for around 7 years now. They are tasked with leading the public library community with the aim to increase public awareness and advocacy of the e-book and e-audiobook issues such as content, pricing, access currently faced by Canadian public libraries. So some of the things I'm going to touch on today is how COVID has impacted borrowing habits, publishing changes that have impacted libraries as a result, the current licensing landscape, and then potential legislative changes and approaches that we're currently exploring. So I thought we'd start with some statistics. So this graph shows the combined circulation from Toronto, Edmonton, Vancouver, and Mississauga. So only those 4 libraries, but those 4 libraries really, we do tend to use them as national indicators from across the country. So you can see that public libraries across the board are seeing a decrease in physical circulation. That was a gentle downward trend until we hit March 2022, when it hit a pretty significant bump. And then we also saw an increase for digital content. So to bring it a bit more local, what you have here is Oakville in particular. The gray line is total circulation, so the blue and the orange combined. You will see that we are a little bit different from the national trend in that we're not seeing the same, we are seeing a little bit of a decline, but not to the same level in our physical circulation. It is still lower than it was pre-pandemic, but it is continuing to increase. And you are seeing a pretty significant jump in digital circulation. But one thing I did want to have a brief conversation about was the challenges we face in comparing physical circulation with digital circulation. We are not comparing apples to apples. These statistics here, the digital circulation is made up of 26 different platforms consisting of Cloud Library, which is primarily ebooks and audiobooks, to our Hoopla, which is streaming media, TV shows, movies, etc. It also includes things like LinkedIn Learning, our Creative Bug videos. It includes Press Reader, which is newspapers from all over the world. It includes our magazines, but it also includes our databases. So as people go in and explore articles, those circulations are being included in here. So it is challenging to compare them directly. I mean, to a certain degree, we have to, but just to see that when you're seeing these spikes, some of those are when we bring on a new platform. For example, the spike that you can see right around Q2 of 2021 and up a little bit, that's when we introduced Press Reader. So we introduced Press Reader, which is 150 plus newspapers from all over the world. So of course that you're going to see what that spike is. This is a more clear breakdown of what makes that up. So you can see of that statistic, the majority of are the e-newspapers and databases. So those databases include things like Academic One File, even Ancestry, Canadian Business Online, Canadian Periodicals Index, Quarterly Consumer Reports, Encyclopedia Britannica, and all of those. Then you'll also see the movies, the magazines, the ebooks, and the audiobooks, and in there is also the e-learning component. Also wanted to highlight spending trends overall. You will see that Oakville Public Library is one of the higher in this list in terms of what we're spending on digital content. I do want to frame that is as a direct result of the surpluses we've been running for the past number of years and the money that we've redirected. If we were using what we budgeted, this would not be what this is. This would be significantly lower for the digital content. But because we were running surpluses, we were able to put $100,000+ in addition to what we had budgeted every year for the past 3 years. So that's where some of that is. And so jumping into publishers, in 2011, most major publishers were offering ebooks to libraries for sale at approximately retail prices on a perpetual license, meaning that we didn't lose access at any point. However, in 2013, prices started rising and to a multiple of the retail price. The licenses were perpetual use license, meaning they would not expire. And so in that case, should approximately 4 times retail. So in other words, at this time, those prices and licensing terms were actually relatively reasonable. So what that means is that early on, they were setting a price, but we had it in perpetuity, and we didn't have to renew it or rebuy it. So it made sense to us that we were paying higher prices because digital copy, it made sense. However, by 2014, all of the major multinational publishers had opened their catalog for public e-library lending. We had our challenges, but we're still in a relatively good place. In 2018 is when the landscape really started to shift. Publishers began switching their licensing model from perpetual use to metered use, but did not lower their prices. So basically what we're talking about metered, and we speak to it a little bit in the report, is you would buy a book and you would get it for 26 circulations. And then after 26 circulations, you would need to rebuy it. So as you can imagine, those popular books get really expensive really fast, particularly if you're spending 4 times what you would spend on a physical book for the exact same item. So metered use licensings differ in that they expire and we lose access to them, either after circulations or after a certain period of time, such as 2 years. This means that libraries are needing to choose between whether to repurchase and lose the book or to purchase new content and make that available. With stable or even decreasing collection budgets, it's often not possible to do both, which makes collection development really, really challenging. It's really hard for us to be able to figure out what we can buy new and what we're going to have to rebuy again based on trends. And it can be super challenging if a book that you let go suddenly is featured on Brené Brown's podcast, and you see this spike and you didn't really budget for it, and now all of a sudden you have it. There's also user expectations around ebooks. I just placed a request on an ebook, and it tells you, it said, I will get it basically in 18 months. And so there's a real challenge in that as well. We can't afford to buy the copies in digital that we can in print. And a lot of times that's confusing for customers. We did see some reprieve with the pandemic. A lot of the big 5 publishers reduced their restrictions, which was fantastic. However, now we're starting to see them come back. So this is the current state of ebook purchase models from the big 5 publishers. They are all a 1-copy, 1-user lending model. In addition, all ebooks and some e-audios have licensings that rely on metering. From our perspective, metered access that relies on a fixed term, 1 year or 2 years, is the most expensive and the least preferable option, since it guarantees that the libraries will have to review and decide whether to repurchase the content on a regular basis. In addition to the cost of repurchasing the title, there is the staff time involved in conducting the review and making the repurchase decisions. On a positive note, publishers have at last started to introduce options rather than a single purchasing model for all titles. At the moment, we're seeing this in cost per circ options, where the library pays a small fee every time a title circulates, rather than a larger upfront purchase price. This is generally available for backlists rather than popular content. And that's very similar to our Hoopla model. So Hoopla is our streaming platform. And so everything that is available on there has a hidden, well, not a hidden cost. It's hidden to the customers, but we're very aware, anywhere from 99 cents up to $6.99. And so as people use it, we get charged. That's actually another important thing to mention about our digital content, is that on a platform like Hoopla, we put caps on it because of funding. So based on that, so just say we put caps on a daily basis. So I'm not entirely sure exactly what our daily caps are, but just say the daily cap is $5,000. Once users hit that $5,000, nobody else can access it. So if you're out trying to find a movie to stream on Hoopla at 7 p.m., it will give you a message saying that you're done for the day, and that to come back tomorrow. And that's simply because there has to be a way for us to control the costs, because if we were let that go, that could go through their entire budget in the first 2 months. So it is challenging because all the different platforms have different pricing models, so budgeting for it is extremely challenging. Hoopla is more challenging than I think what we're seeing with this model in books, which makes a little bit more sense for us, especially with the backlist, whereas people circulate, we're being charged per circ, versus sometimes if you're going to be charged the full book, and it may only circ twice. So for some of those backlists, it makes much more sense. The popular titles, less so. But it is harder to predict and control expenditures, given that use will vary. However, it does mean that the library is not paying for titles that aren't being used. So there is shifting in it. We're just trying to figure out what that means long-term. And is it actually what is better for us? For many years, publishers insisted that they couldn't offer dual purchasing models and only made one option available. So the fact that there's now an additional option on the table is a step in the right direction, even if it's not an option that we would ideally choose. So this is just an example of some of the prices, more current, that you can see. So Louise Penny, a print, would cost $28.98. The library, we get discounted, so we do RFPs with designated vendors and get, where we can leverage our overall purchasing and get set discounts. So we would pay something along the lines of $23, but a digital copy is $75. Douglas Kelton would be even higher. And then e-audio is extremely expensive. The Sarah J. Maas is a great example. The physical would cost us $20. The digital would be $96.79, where we can even get access. Print books and digital books, we are struggling with, but not to the same level that we are with e-audio. A lot of that has to do with Audible and contracts that creators are signing with Audible, where libraries cannot get access to it. And the best example I always like to use is Justin Trudeau's Common Ground. We cannot get access to that audiobook in Canada because Audible owns it. And Amazon does not have any interest in playing with libraries. So that being said, there are things in motion. Last year, we were celebrating the success of our US colleagues who passed state laws supporting access to electronic content on reasonable terms. Maryland and New York were first out of the gate. The idea was that there was more support for state legislation and it would be easier to pass than trying to get federal legislation passed. If there was success at the state level, then there would likely to be more support for federal legislation moving forward. So the Maryland and New York laws required publishers to license the library on reasonable terms. If the publisher makes an ebook license available to the public, and publishers may not limit the number of licenses, because we did see that with Macmillan's, where a new book would be published and each library could only have one single copy. Or there's even some libraries or some publishers who put an embargo in. So a book would come out and libraries couldn't even access a single copy for the first 6 months, which again causes us reputational risk because the public doesn't understand. They come to our catalog, it's not there. We get emails, they're like, why don't you have it? They think we're not on top of things when we just can't access it. So reasonable terms do allow for limits on the number of simultaneous users, limits on the number of days a library may grant a user access to the licensed work, and digital right management obligations. So we weren't asking for open file and we can just share it. They are saying that there does need to be control over it. We just want reasonable terms. And there was significant support from state legislators that led to the passing of these bills. So Amazon signed contracts with the Digital Public Library of America to up restricted content, including Audible content for all US libraries as soon as they had an obligation to provide access to some. So their actions had a positive impact on the entire country. However, then the pushback came. At first, it started in a lawsuit by the American Association of Publishers against the state of Maryland and extended to significant government pressure through all jurisdictions. Lobbying against the legislation came from all types of media corporations, including music, video distribution, and major television networks. There was concern that this bill would start with ebooks and extend to all other formats. They were afraid that this was a slippery slope and didn't want to see their content impacted. The American Association of Publishers argued that the new legislation created a shadow Copyright Act and gave them unprecedented control over transactions with the publishers. Further analysis by the US Copyright Access found that because the publishers were required to grant access, to grant a license instead of regulating the terms that the federal law was preempted by the state law. The federal district court in Maryland agreed with this analysis and deemed the law unconstitutional. Under the Copyright Acts, right holders have the exclusive right to choose whether and when and to whom to distribute their copyrighted works. So the Maryland law was overturned and the New York governor vetoed the bill in New York. So throughout the legislative process, libraries have affirmed that there was strong support for their cause by legislators, but that a new approach was required. It's a little bit like a soap opera, I feel, sometimes. So Library Futures and ALA, which is the American Library Association, joined forces to evaluate how to leverage the perceived support at the state level through new approaches. It brought forward legal experts from across the country and Canada to look at opportunities under state jurisdiction. In June 2022, they published their position paper detailing approaches being undertaken across various states and provided models for possible consideration. Since the requirement to sell seemed to be preempted by the federal law, the paper looked at what powers were within the bounds of state control to be able to help the situation. Laws governing purchase and other contracts were within the authority of each state. Therefore, legislation could be created which would govern the contents of the contracts instead of just mandating that publishers sell them on reasonable terms. This does rely on the fact that publishers agree to sell the libraries within the bounds of the contracted limitations. So state contract laws vary, so there are different approaches to be considered. Some of the potential options for consideration by the states that are being proposed are to enact legislation that would define the contract terms, that would define fair pricing and loan periods and contracting practices, and enact legislation to protect libraries as consumers from deceptive and harmful practices and define what these deceptive practices are. Would also require publishers who are selling licenses to state-funded libraries, the requirements to meet procurement guidelines. The state is within its authority to ensure effective use of its funds to support the better interests of the state. This would be similar to the procurement bylaws that many of us use through our municipalities. So being clear that these are taxpayer-funded organizations, and there should be requirements through contracts to recognize that. So the think tank went as far as defining some draft legislation for states to review and adopt. It sets out legal arguments and restrictions on contracts for state consideration. The purpose clearly states that the legislation is for the state to protect public policy and support the traditional practices of libraries providing non-discriminatory access to library materials. It also acknowledges that this is required due to the unequal bargaining power of publishers and libraries and the pattern of abuse of the market by the publishers, and the state is just ensuring its interest to ensure that its citizens have equal access to information through public libraries. The second set of prohibitions is based on licensing practices that libraries have been facing through some of the contract models that we have seen throughout most of these, but haven't necessarily persisted over time. It doesn't allow contracts to restrict our ability to loan or manage the length of loans. It does not support delays or embargoes. The model requests that there is no restriction in the number of circulations, but also provides guidance for states to allow unreasonable limitations in terms of pricing and circulation limits. So basically letting libraries set their own circulation terms, whether that goes out for 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, that is a library to be determined, not necessarily the publisher. So there are 12 states currently involved in active legislation development around this issue, including the Maryland and New York. Each is taking a different approach based on the strength of their state laws in different areas and working to define the reasonable restrictions to put in their laws. 2023 is going to be an interesting year as we evaluate the success of these new initiatives and watch publishers react to the new terms. We will need to continue to provide global support for our partners as they reach out with new approaches. As we began our journey to look back at legislation in 2021, we worked with legal counsel to evaluate our approach here in Canada and confirmed that we were looking for a fair model. We evaluated the approaches brought forward by Maryland and New York and had them assessed and worked to clarify in a few words both what the issues were and what we wanted as a solution for a sustainable future here in Canada. The committee penned a digital equity paper for use with meeting with legislators. They highlighted undermining access, so talking about restrictive ebook licensing models, making it difficult for libraries to fulfill their central mission, undermining prudent management of taxpayer dollars, and incomplete collections. And then at the end of 2022, the Canadian Urban Library Council has joined forces with the Canadian Federation of Library Associations and the Canadian Association of Research Libraries to create a joint committee to recommend potential government policy solutions here in Canada that are sustainable conditions for Canadian libraries. Bringing together experts from across the country and working with our legislative and government partners, the group is hoping to review the work completed to date, participate in an environmental scan to seek successful global actions happening worldwide, discuss opportunities and strategies with legal and government relation experts, and develop a series of recommendations to bring forward to levels of government to hopefully see some change. So some of the options that we can look at here in Canada is evaluate options for federal-based legislation, and there have been ongoing conversations through Canadian Urban Library Council with a number of ministries. Some of the challenges is this falls under multiple ministries. So identifying which ministry might be more favorable to our cause has been part of that process. Evaluating provincial-based solutions based on the strength of provincial laws, as well as copyright exception to allow digital copying by libraries for works no longer be distributed or out of commerce. So I know that wasn't necessarily the most riveting, but it is one of the most important issues public libraries are facing right now. I also want to recognize that this is the Digital Content Working Group. Mississauga, Vancouver, Toronto, Ottawa, Banque, which is the Bibliothèque de Montréal, Halifax, Vancouver Island Regional, and Edmonton Public. So they are doing tremendous, tremendous work, along with the Canadian Urban Library Council and the political agency that they have hired in order to be able to assist us in having conversations through all levels of government. So suffice it all this to say, it is a changing landscape. There is some exciting things on the docket, hopefully, for this year. We're watching closely what's happening in the US. We're having conversations about what could happen here in Canada, all the while trying to balance our current collections budget as things get more and more complicated. So happy to take questions.
Thank you. Can I ask one point of clarification before I look for questions? You said you were using a hypothetical budget. You said $5,000 a day. That's not our real budget for Hoopla.
I don't think, no, that would be way too high.
Yeah,
Closer to 2,000.
a day.
Yeah,
Wow, okay. And that's just on Hoopla or
Hoopla.
overall?
and that would be Hoopla.
Okay. Surprised that that's still that popular in light of the proliferation of streaming services during the pandemic.
Yeah, although I think it does speak to the fact that there's still a lot of people who don't have access to the streaming
Yeah, I guess,
services.
yeah. Okay, members of the board, questions? Just go ahead, and I want to say your name so I remember it. You are?
Rebecca,
Rebecca, thank you.
thank you.
I'll get it. I'll eventually, I promise by the end of the meeting, I'll remember everybody's name.
Kind of two questions. One, it just seems, yes, that, you know, with that budget being so high every day, that there is a strong demand for streaming services and digital content. Have we ever like surveyed the people in our community just to see like, do you take part, do you use digital content? Is there a reason why you don't, like that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so as part of our last strategic plan in 2021, we did go out with a customer survey, and one of the questions we asked was about what kind of content they use. We didn't necessarily get into why they didn't, although we do have conversations through the branch and through other avenues. It is, and I think it shows through our physical content, that some libraries are seeing a relatively drastic drop, but we're not here in Oakville. And when I talk to people, the majority of them always make sure to tell me that they still love reading a print book, that they spend all day staring at a screen, and when they want to come home, they want a book, and how much they miss it. We know that that's particularly a trend with teens. They like the physical book. They spend all day on a screen. They like the differentiation, or what, it has a different effect on your brain as a whole. I think we've seen a pretty significant adoption by seniors of digital content. I think prior to the pandemic, there was more resistance, but I think not having access to it kind of put them in this. And I know this because I forget who we were talking with the other day, but when we started to reopen after the pandemic, we had so many seniors come in, and even when we were open, but people couldn't access, but they could access us, they would call with, my granddaughter got me an iPad. I don't know what to do. And have us walk them through, like, what is setting up an Apple ID? How do you access the apps? How do you get on our services? We have people walk in, it's still in the box, and are just like, here. But it has been amazing because the seniors have adopted it. Like, once they have it, they love it. And I do think there is more accessibility features through tablets that really benefit them. So I'm not sure I'm answering your question, because it's a broad kind of umbrella in which they fit, but it is conversations where we analysis, and BookNet, which is an organization in North America that does research about books, does say that very few people are one or the other. A lot of them, it's circumstance-based. So if you're traveling, you may very well take an iPad filled with ebooks where you might not do that if you're at home. So there's a lot of intersection between them as well.
And can I ask a follow-up? Sure. Just because you mentioned the other word that I noticed out of the whole story that you just shared, which was accessibility. Is there a lot of working together with accessibility other groups? Or how does that work? I'm sure
so I feel like that could be a whole other paper. So I do sit on the board for the Center of Equitable Library Access, CELA, who is a separate organization that works for accessibility when we're talking about people with visual impairments. There are very few digital, like print books that are fully accessible. Or at least fully accessible all at the same time. So sometimes it'll come out in a print book, and the other pieces, the more accessible pieces, won't come out for 6 months to a year afterwards. So that's something that we're continuing to work on. There are different rules because they can, they have more freedom to burn where they're serving that population in there. But there's all kinds of accessibility issues. There's the visual, there's the audio, but there's also the economic pieces to it. So these are some of the broader conversations. And this is, I think, why libraries are pushing so hard, is that it's equitable access. And corporations don't think about these things. We think about them because our customers are in front of us, and we want to be able to serve them to the best of our ability. Trying to explain to somebody why they can't access a book because of this reason or this reason or this reason, it's challenging. And it's one of our roles is to remind people that everybody deserves access to this type of information.
Agreed.
Are you done, Rebecca? Yes. Great, thank you. Further questions, comments? Bill?
So when I was going through the information, HarperCollins, why are they seem to be the only ones providing fair prices? And I'm just wondering, it's just kind of interesting. There's 5 of them, but HarperCollins is the one that's being fair, and the other one's not so much. Why is that?
I'm not sure I can tell you exactly, because you're right. And it's Macmillan is definitely been one of our key, I'm going to use the word nemesis, and that's strong, but I feel like it's safe here. Because they had the embargo, but they run the gambit, and I'm not entirely sure why. There's also a strong difference. These are the big 5 located in the US. When we deal with our Canadian versions of those, they're much more willing to work with us. However, they don't have access to the content based on licensing. So it's also a very American point of view. A lot of Canadian, especially the local publishers or the small publishing houses, absolutely excited to work with us. But even the Canadian offices of Macmillan and HarperCollins are much more willing to work with us than their American counterparts. That shifted, I think, because somebody noticed slightly. But it's still one of the struggles, but I can't tell you why one is. Maybe the head had a good relationship with the library as a child, and has a little bit of a sweet spot for us and is trying to find that balance. I don't know, but we do keep trying. We've met with them over and over and over again, trying to bring forth data after data that libraries help publishers.
Right.
We build readers. That is our job. And some of the BookNet statistics show that somebody who borrows a library book will, for every library book they borrow, will buy 4.
Right.
Right? But they're facing all kinds of challenges, and I respect the fact that the publishing industry is facing tons of challenges, but they seem to have picked out libraries as one of them, and we're not.
Right. So, so in terms of our website and all that, if you know, if we have all these people wondering why they can't get access to a book and all that, do we put something on the website that kind of discusses this issue, or can we do that even, or?
Well, yeah, I mean, we definitely could. We have in the past. Normally, when was it? The last campaign, we do campaigns every couple of years, particularly I think when we're looking to do a big push with a level of government. We'll do a major campaign just to try and raise public awareness. And then we'll link to things, we'll put things through our Instagram, but we do that almost as a national group. But you're not wrong, we could potentially put a section on our website that just kind of explains some of the issues and you know, curious about why you may not be seeing.
Right, because it would be frustrating for people.
It is.
Like they can't get access to it, and you know, instead of blaming us, people should know, you know, what the issues are. And anyway, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Perhaps we could put the links to the email addresses for the CEOs of those publishing houses right on our website.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons that we don't, because there's no, we like to do it when there's a call to action.
Yeah.
But you're not wrong, it would be good just to provide basic information, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. So I assume this whole issue does not apply to audiobooks on CDs, right? They work more like print media.
Books on CDs, yes. Yeah.
So is this all because when we buy an ebook or the audiobook electronically, we don't own the media or the media distribution? This is all controlled by them?
Yeah. Yep. It's very different ways of thinking about what is essentially a digital version of a physical thing. In terms of like when you buy a book, you own that book. You can give that book away.
And same with the audiobook on CD?
Yes, yes. But the digital is different.
Why?
I don't know.
It's because of the distribution, right?
I think it's because of the distribution. It's because of the licensing. But I know people, like if you have an ebook on your Kindle, they can change it. So once you buy it, because a couple of years ago there was an article about where I forget what publisher actually updated a version of a book and they pushed it out to people's Kindles, and people were really upset about it because they bought this version of a book and they had, because it's a digital license and they can connect, they can update it. So
and that's where I was
you
going
don't really own anything.
Right, but that's where I was going with this thought process is, could the solution for all this be a common library distribution media process where all of this is consolidated in one place that libraries share and distribute on their own? Of course, the publishers aren't going to like that because they see a revenue stream here, but to me, this sounds like it's a distribution issue more so, or that is disguised as a licensing issue. And
you're not wrong, and there is and I mentioned it in here, the DPLA, the digital, oh my God, it's the US, Digital Public Library, something. But they have like a national library. Now it doesn't necessarily hold ebooks, or it holds ebooks out of copyright, but tends to hold more kind of like historical data to it. There's also the Internet Archive, which is currently, there are a number of Canadian libraries who have been digitizing books and loading them up. The argument being that we bought the physical book, if we scan it and put the physical book away and have the digital copy, that's a one-for-one trade and we should be allowed to do that. That's in the courts now. So that will be really interesting to kind of see how that plays out. Because if the argument is that if we bought this physical copy, we scan it, we no longer circulate that physical copy, we circulate the digital copy, we should be able to do that because it's a one-for-one. But that, as I said, is currently in the courts. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Hamilton Public Library and I believe Milton Public Library have both participated in those activities with those pieces. So it is, I don't pretend to understand the laws governing it, but it will eventually come to a head. And I don't just think in that area it's just libraries, because it's even when you purchase a downloadable movie, do you actually really own it?
The same is going on with 3D printing, by the way. It's like when you have a printer and you print something, do you own the object or do you own the design? And who owns the design? What if you import it from across the world and then you have to pay taxes? So this whole thing is going on a much bigger scale. So I suspect.
About patents and copyright.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anybody have so many speakers list? No, Meredith?
Just, so a quick clarification. So with something like Cloud Library, so every time somebody takes digitally borrows an audiobook or an ebook, is Oakville Public Library basically paying for the usage of that Oakville Public Library user using that?
So as far as I know, we haven't actually started using the per circ. We're still buying the license, and depending on what publisher that could be, right? So if it's 26 circulations, then, and this is the other challenge, right? Because depending on the book that you buy and the publisher it comes from, it has different rules, which the staff time related to that is significant. And just keeping track of, so if we buy a book from HarperCollins through Cloud Library, because the platform, but it's also the vendor that the middleman between the publishers, we would get that for 26 circulations before we'd have to rebuy it. Whereas Macmillan, we may purchase it for $150 and we get it technically in relative perpetuity.
Okay. Another, quick question. So I recalled at the start of your presentation, you showed the increasing demand for audiobooks and for digital books, a little bit a dip on the physical books. And I was curious if, there's data collection of the physical circulation as to, what types of physical books are being taken, like ages or genres, and if that's contributing to, say, future budgets, how much are we investing in physical circulation versus digital circulation?
Yeah, we absolutely do that analysis, and a really great example of that is children's nonfiction. We've seen a drastic drop in the use of children's nonfiction because now instead of needing a book on Africa, they just go online and find articles on Africa. Depending on their teachers, some teachers still require them to use a book. So you have seen a shift. We don't necessarily purchase as much juvenile nonfiction. Where we may see an increase, true crime is where we're seeing an increase, right, in those types of areas. So every year, and we actually have a particular system called Collection HQ that does that analysis for us and just helps our collection teams really stay on top of trends, as well as weeding and all the other kind of areas that we need to stay on top of when you're dealing with as many books as we deal with on an annual basis.
Further questions or comments? Andrew?
If I own a physical copy of a book, I can donate it to the library.
Correct.
And you can do whatever you like with it. What if I purchased a digital copy? What prevents me from donating that?
You can donate it, but we don't have a system to allow access. Because it can't be uploaded into our system, because publishers would not allow that to happen. And that's through their agreement with Cloud Library or Overdrive, which are, for libraries, there's two vendors that do our ebooks. There's Bibliotecas Cloud Library, which we currently have, and there's Overdrive.
So the platform is the
Correct.
The barrier there.
Can I jump in here for a second? Because I have a little bit of experience in this as a film producer. I mean, you can't transfer an ebook to a library or a third party. When you license any media, digital media, you are buying a license to use it under certain terms and conditions. One of those terms and conditions is for home use only or personal use. You cannot use it for commercial use. You cannot dissect it or extract it or use it for any reasons. I think there's some exclusions for academic purposes. So no, they restrict even to that extent. When you buy, if you download Avatar on Apple, for example, on iTunes, you're buying a license to use that, a non-exclusive license to use it on for your home use only, and it's non-transferable. So it's the same thing. It's a slippery slope, because I mean, I understand to an extent that producers and writers and such want to generate income from their works in a field that is highly pirated. Anything digital, the terrible, like there's always the bad side, right? Everything electronic is pirated. Of course. And that's one of the reasons a lot of these productions get put in place. So I just wanted to clarify that I have, like, this is something that, I deal with on a regular basis, that those licenses are very clearly home use only.
To your knowledge, is there anyone who has a model where, as a private user, I could purchase a copy and simultaneously donate a copy, like pay for one for a public library?
So there are platforms out there that, and we don't have it here. I'm trying to think of an example, but it used to exist. I think it might have been Overdrive at one point, where it's almost like a, oh my God, what do you do? Like influencers do it when you click on the link and then they get money for you clicking on the link.
Yeah, affiliate links. Yeah.
A what?
Affiliate?
Yes, yeah. So they used to be able to do that. And actually, if you went and you searched that, you could actually go through it, buy a book from a publisher, and then donate one to the library, and you'd buy like two. However, I don't think that still exists. It used to, because I remember seeing that, because it was almost like a fundraising type of piece that, particularly if we didn't have a copy of a book and you wanted to buy the copy of the book, that you could buy it for the library as that aspect. It used to be a feature. I know there was significant issues with some of the libraries about control and people adding things to the collection that we had no interest in being added to the collection. So I'm not sure it still exists, but it wasn't explored at some point. I just don't think it was overly successful.
I'm wondering if a campaign to that effect might be another way to bring some public pressure to bear on the big publishers.
Yeah.
Just an idea.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
But the pressure doesn't have to be put upon the publishers for physical books. It's the digital books. Yeah, okay. Any further questions? Go ahead.
Just a quick one. Is this a North American issue or is this an international issue? Like, are there any places in the world where there's a model that does work?
As far as I know, it's pretty global. To the degree I think is different. We're very much tend to focus on North America, but one of the items that I mentioned that the group is looking at is starting to do more of a global picture and try and take more of that environmental stand from a more global perspective to see, are there examples of, I think what they're actually looking for is more examples of legislation rather than, because we can't change companies' minds, but how is that happening? Or even where that exists, is there success that we can actually research and bring back and be like, see, they have this model here and this is how it works. So I do believe they're starting to work closely with IFLA, the International Federation of Library Associations. I remember so many acronyms. With that, which is the international library community that works together. So.
Thanks, Amos. I have a couple of quick questions. So first of all, you were talking about the circulation meter, so to speak, on a particular product. So was it 26, did you say?
Yeah.
So does 26 circulations include renewals?
I do believe it does.
So if somebody renews it twice, then that's 3 circulations.
Correct.
On the DRM on these digital products, it allows for one user at a time, correct?
Yeah.
So there's a mechanism, and I believe you explained this to us before, but there's a mechanism where when the book is checked out, if you have 2 licenses, that's all that goes out.
Correct.
So in an actual fact, in an actual accounting perspective, there is no difference between a physical and digital book.
Yes, in our Overdrive platform,
Yeah.
yes, that is the case.
What do you mean?
Well, Gale eBooks operates a little bit differently, but those tend to be more, they're not they are publisher-based books, but they're not fiction books. They're a bit different.
Right.
But you're 100% right that in our cloud library, there is no difference in our circulation. It's a 1-for-1, same as a print book, yes.
So it seems like it's a significant cash grab on the part of publishers, because there's no real distinction.
That's our argument.
In fact, if anything, it's an uber cash grab, because they don't have to actually print a book and ship it. They can just send you some bits and bytes to provide that book.
Their argument is that digital books are equally expensive, if not more expensive, because of the servers and all the different pieces.
Yeah, I heard that in the movie industry when they made us all drop film
Yeah.
and go to digital content.
And if anybody's curious, the 26 comes from that, because that's what the publishing industry has determined is the lifespan of a hardcover book. They determined that a hardcover book would go out physically 26 times and would have to be replaced, which libraries have proven over and over and over again that that is not the case.
So that's where that number comes from.
Yeah.
Their theoretical experience of, oh, that's interesting. Is there, I understand, I don't appreciate, but I understand why Amazon would have the attitude they have, because they're effectively competing with libraries to a certain extent, especially programs like their Audible program. Is there some sort of move afoot in the publishing industry to be anti-library? Like, is this the first salvo in their attempt to wrestle away free access to their works?
I think from a lot of their perspectives, they see us as the enemy rather than a contributor to literacy. I think reading overall is seeing a downward turn. I think that the incidents that we had, and Macmillan's a great example of because when they started with the embargoes, that was really hard. Now they backed out of some of those because of public pressure. Because all of a sudden public libraries were quite vocal about some of the embargo pieces to that. So they did back down on that. But to me, the only reason that they came up with a lot of reasons about why they did it. A lot of it being that, they're trying to save their industry but in the end, to us, it's like, it doesn't, none of their arguments make sense to us. And we really struggle to get them at the table to talk to us. It's happened a couple of times, but nowhere being productive. And so we can't get a sense of where this is coming from other than what we're seeing in terms of how they're approaching us, because they won't even come and talk to us about some of the challenges and allow us to have a discussion about how we maybe could partner in a different way, because we do nothing, in our minds, we do nothing but benefit them. Where somebody may not want to buy a book of a new author, they could borrow a book of a new author and then buy the 18 books that come after it. And just building, like I said, starting kids early and building readers who read through their entire life.
You're building a market.
Is nothing. They need us. That's our opinion anyway.
So I have a couple more questions, but I'll go to my colleagues. Meredith, sorry, who had their hand up?
Rebecca.
Oh, okay, Rebecca, go ahead. I thought I saw Meredith's hand. Oh, Celso, did you put your hand up? Okay, go ahead.
Sorry, and it was just kind of a follow-up to what you said. Is there any way that libraries could side with the authors? Would there ever be like some vocal authors that would kind of take the side? I know it's a kind of a catch-22 for them, right? Like, they get paid here, but maybe they love libraries, but maybe it would just take one.
Yeah, and I think that's where we're starting to see the more of the challenge with because there's increasing authors and major authors who are signing Amazon deals that limit libraries. And some of it is, are they aware of that, or is that just a byproduct that they may not fully understand? So these are conversations we're starting to have about, okay, do we need to actually start talking with author groups? And there are a lot of local authors, and part of it, I think this was in the report, that it's self-publishing is pushing a lot of this as well. So it's really finding the right authors to talk to, and have them start to advocate for us, because it has been disheartening to see some of the authors signing on with Amazon and having such restrictive rules put around their materials.
It's not dissimilar in the film world either.
Yeah.
I have content on Amazon, and I'm not allowed to place it on other services, and it's very frustrating. And then they keep diminishing our royalties.
Yeah.
Like we went from being an actual countable number per minute of streaming revenue, and it's now since an infinitesimal number. You can't even really conceptualize how such a small number it is per minute. It used to be you could figure it out as like, I don't know, like 1/10 of a cent a minute or something like that. Now it's like 1/1000th of a cent, and it's a fancy calculation. So it's an industry, it's a creator's dilemma right now for sure. And when creators are approached with a deal, with a check, it's hard to say no.
say no.
You know, notwithstanding the fact that libraries or film producers or music producers, you know, want to do better by their public. It's a challenging issue. My last question is, a few years ago, we got involved, one of the acronyms was doing a lobby effort in Canada to MPs or MPPs. I don't remember which. It was the federal level, I believe.
It was federal, yeah.
What was the result of that, and is it still ongoing?
So it's still ongoing. Did result in some conversations. But again, as I mentioned, one of the things that we've been talking a lot about, and I'm blanking on the name of the lobby company that the Canadian Urban Library Council hired to help with some of these pieces. We're continue to have conversations with multiple ministries. But there is hesitation because it covers different ones by each of them to take ownership of the issue. And so we will continue to have conversations and hopefully get to a point where one of them is willing to actually start to move things forward, which will hopefully then open up some other avenues for discussion with that. But right now, the challenge is just finding where to put what we're asking for. And frankly, the ideal place would actually be in at least 3 different places with us. So it got our foot in the door, but there's still a long way to go in terms of actually resolving the issue. But they're willing to have conversations, which is the first start.
Okay, that was my try run for a last question. Here's my real last question. Has there been any thought to actually mobilizing the public on this issue? Actually getting, like, for example, MP cards to be at the checkouts of, which would be illegal under our current law, but having MP cards at the checkout where you could actually sign and send to your local MP. You know, as an elected official, I do not like when we get these campaigns because you fill up your email box or whatever, but they can be effective because it really will sometimes move that issue up the ladder. So instead of just using lobby firms or GR firms, has there any thought about actually getting the public involved?
Yeah, I think a lot of the thought around that is that would be the step once we solidified a little bit about what we're looking to do. Because the fear, or at least the conversation at the table that I've been sitting at is that we can do that, but it's still a hot potato issue between the different areas. And until we can find one and then do the focus and then put the pressure on them that works. If not, then it's just like, well, we say it's this, we say it's that, and it just gets another past issue.
Okay. You sort of like that chant. What do we want? Change. How do we want to do it? We have no idea. Yeah. So, I mean, it's probably worth looking at jurisdictions, like we're watching the Americans very closely. It's probably worth looking at jurisdictions and seeing if there is a successful approach at some point and then using that to try to mobilize the public. Because I can't imagine that anybody who walks into the Oakville Public Library wouldn't sign a card to Pam or to Anita or whoever the MP is for the area that they live in. To really say, let's move on this.
It's just, what are we asking for?
Yeah, I guess so. We have to clarify what we're asking for. Okay, thank you. That was a great discussion, and it's going to continue. Andrew, you up next.
Well, it's something you said.
Okay. I like to be inspiring.
So you said that if someone renews a digital item, then that counts as a circulation again. Are you obligated to circulate digital items on the same terms as a physical item, or could you modify that? Like, could you make the term 6 weeks if you wanted instead of 3 or 1 week? Which I admit doesn't really solve a lot, but it might help.
Good question. I don't know the answer. I can find out for you, but I can think of problems that it would cause. Partly, again, if every circulation was 6 weeks, and somebody read it in the first 3 days and didn't return it, then the wait times would be really, really high. We do actually, we shorten them because depending on somebody, so with the digital, what we can do to a certain extent, I don't know if we do the physical, is if there's a certain hold threshold, like say over 50 people are waiting, then we'll actually shorten the loan period to try and circulate it faster.
So for a hot new item.
Yeah, but I think there's a max, but I can check.
Right?
Yeah.
And then you're satisfying more customers, even though you're burning through your license quicker. So.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Andrew. Anything further? Thanks, Sarah. That was a fascinating conversation. Please keep us apprised of what the industry or the sector is doing And certainly, call upon us as a board to, do whatever we can do from a lobby perspective or speaking with our MPs or whatever the case is to move that ball up the hill, because it seems like a significant issue. We're trying to modernize, and yet we're being, we're trying to go electric engines and they want to keep us, shoveling coal, and that's really sad.
Yeah.
Okay, look for a motion to receive this report. Can I get that motion, please? Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Meredith. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. Next up is board policy review, and that there's two recommendations here: that a board policy review report be received and that an ad hoc committee be established to review non-identified board policies and bring any recommendations to the board for approval. Tara.
So this has been honestly on my agenda for a number of years, and it just didn't come to the top. But we did the bylaws last year, and so it's time to really address the outdated board policies directly related to the board itself. As you can see, there are 9. They were first done back in 2013 and have not been updated since then. Some of them no longer align with our bylaws. I think there's some of them that probably are no longer needed at all. So I would like to update them. And I think my recommendation for the best approach is to have the board form an ad hoc committee to address them. And then hopefully we can get them done relatively quickly.
Yeah, that seemed to work very well last time with the bylaws. Yeah. Discussion. Anybody have a comment on this? Andrew, I'm sure you have some past experience in this because you chaired our bylaw review last time. Do you have any feelings on this particular proposal?
I support the formation of the ad hoc committee, and I'm happy to move to receive. And I don't know what the next motion would be to strike it.
Yeah, that's right. You'd be prepared to move recommendation 1 and 2 then, because it's already written. Yeah. Is there a seconder to that motion? Thank you, Bill. Further discussion on that? And then the question comes up after that, who's going to be on the committee? But we'll deal with that in a second. All in favor? That's carried. Okay, so do you want to create terms of reference first, or do you want to actually see if we can find some volunteers now? What would your preference be?
It's easier if we have the board members to start with.
Okay.
And then we can do it terms of reference.
Okay. Who would like to, are there volunteers to fulfill this responsibility? Bill?
I can, I was on the other one, but if I can do it, I'm not sure what the timing is, but.
It's been 10 years.
So you have 10 years, Bill?
Yeah, 10 years. So if it can wait,
Until you're back?
I would be happy to do it. But.
Anybody else? Andrew?
How many people are you looking for?
We had 3 last time. 3?
How many you have last time?
I think we had 3.
3? That didn't include me, though. I was ex officio. Is that right?
Then it had 2.
I don't remember. Didn't?
You were.
Oh, yeah, I'm ex officio on
Yeah.
the board. I don't know if I went to every one of the meetings. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I have a memory issue, clearly.
We only had 2 meetings anyway.
Okay.
I'd be interested.
Okay. Anybody else? Seems like a great committee to me. So that's, we have volunteers, Bill, Andrew, Celso, and Rod. Have I got everybody? Okay, would somebody have to make a motion to appoint those individuals to the committee, and then your committee can elect a chair when you get together, which is the typical way we do things. So, yeah. Are you moving that? Thank you. It's been moved by Rebecca, seconded by, thank you, Avis. All in favor? And that is carried. Congratulations. That will be, that's a good project to sink your teeth into. Okay, 6.5, CEO goals.
So last month, I brought my 2023 CEO goals to the board for feedback. The feedback that I received related to including the strategic pillar as part of each of the goals, as well as including a definition of partnership to be clear about goal number. I didn't really number them, did I? The advancing strategic partnerships goal, that the clarity around how we're defining what a partnership is. So those changes have been incorporated into these, and these are coming to the board for approval. And then in May, you will get your first quarterly update on them.
Comments or questions? Celso.
So we talked about how we're going to measure success in some of these, right, without a target. And he talked about the fact that, if I recall correctly, that some of these we didn't know what the target was, and there's still something to be defined. The challenge I see is for those where we don't have it, we don't have a target or a way to measure success, how are we going to know at the end of the year or next year that they've been accomplished?
So those particularly relate to the frameworks.
Right.
With the targets within the frameworks. There are targets within the frameworks already. What we're talking about is that those frameworks may grow to include new items, which at that point would have new metrics brought to them, which would come to the board quarterly. So for example, the diversity and inclusion strategy does have metrics in there for some of those actions already. But as we work through, for example, one of the examples I used was that the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Employee Resource Group, which has had 3 meetings, had started to talk about what they would like to accomplish. So at that point, I would add these in and bring them back to the board with additions to what we're hoping to accomplish this year, but that the existing ones in here do have measurements of success, and we would update on those quarterly.
So, right, and I don't mean to impose, it's just
Yeah.
a suggestion or a question, really. So take the diversity inclusion, for example. The first one is workforce diversity, right? And the measuring success is increase in representation of diverse employees. Like what % increase? What, is it 1 employee, is that good enough, or are we talking about 10%? Do you see what I mean?
Yes, I do, yeah. And what I can do is when we bring an update next month, or if they choose not to import, is that we'll put in our current state and our goal.
Sure.
Which is what you're looking for, yes? Yeah.
And I think you went.
We had
almost-
talked about it, you're right.
Yeah, and I think you went all on the other framework, the talent management. I think you went almost there, but there's one extra step. So for example, planning. Identify skill gaps within roles and meet the strategic objectives, develop learning plans to address those gaps. So you could say 80% of all gaps have the learning plans.
Okay.
That's an easy way to, then we know
Yeah.
if it's been completed or not, right?
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Elsa. Further comments or questions? Meredith, please.
So, sorry, this is maybe a process question. I apologize, I wasn't here last month for the feedback, and I was curious that now we're in the approval stage. Is there still an opportunity for feedback, or has that window been closed?
That's completely up to the board.
So my only comment on that would be that we are in April.
Okay.
And I think you can, I mean, the board is supreme on this, so you can make a motion and we can try it, but we at some point have to solidify these. It's a difficult year because of the transition of the board and such. So my suggestion would be that we move forward with approving these with some of the tweaks that we just talked about, but that we maybe have a closer dive, a deeper dive into the next round when we do it and try to have a greater conversation and maybe get that done before we get into 2024. That'd be my suggestion. But again, you're certainly within your rights to direct the board or attempt to direct the board otherwise, so.
Okay.
And that could align with what Celso had just talked about, in that when I come back with it, we'll make sure that there's the metrics are in there. That way you have that point that, okay, we determined that we're gonna hit 80% or that we're gonna increase over 5%. That way there is that target. And again, as we go through the year, if we are hitting, as my updates, and we hit 5 in July, we can update it.
Okay.
But if you have feedback, no, okay.
Well, I'm just throwing it out there, just because I don't want to go, because inevitably what that could mean is that we're going to provide feedback and then it has to come back for another cycle, and then we're actually getting into May and June before we get it approved, and then the year's half over. So just a recommendation or suggestion that we use the feedback loop to make notes on how we want to reform, or not reform, but refine the process for the next go round. But use this as a basis. Nothing is ever totally carved in stone, right? So I just think we can use this as a conversation throughout the year as we get progress reports. That's just what I think is probably the best. And I really like Celso's recommendation about the performance-based metrics. That's a place I know the town has gone on many areas, and we're dragging the police service through that as well. So it is the best practice these days is to actually attach performance-based metrics to goals and objectives. So I didn't mean to derail you.
No, it's okay.
I just, sometimes, we've had a few times where we've delayed implementing something so long that we really are almost, we have to then start all over again by the time we approve it. So, and I apologize for the confusion of this year because it's, with the election and reappointments and everything, it becomes a more challenging year. Going forward, it's not quite, you don't have quite the same timeframes. The budget's done sooner, objectives are done sooner, everything gets done sooner, generally by the end of the year, so.
Well, and my goal this year is to have my 2024 goals approved by December.
Yeah,
So,
which is practical in this year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, further discussion on this? Do you have, if anybody has an opposing point of view, I'm certainly happy to hear it. Okay, can I get a motion to approve the recommendation, please? Thank you, Celso. Any, seconder, please? Bill, thank you. Any further comments or questions? All in favor? And that's carried, thank you. Okay, we are moving on to the CEO update.
this is a bit of a longer update.
Oh, sure. Actually, you know what? I'm going to declare, we've been at it now for 2 hours. So you know what? Let's take a 10-minute recess and we can refresh and stretch our legs, and then we'd be more ready to go through the CEO's update because we have that and we have 2 items on the confidential agenda we still have to go through. So, and
And
an
the
election.
vice chair.
And an election. So we have a bit of a meeting yet to go. So enjoy your break, and this meeting is recessed. We're back, and I hope that everybody enjoyed their washroom breaks and their water. Nothing else. Anyway, let's move on with the CEO's update.
Okay. So as I mentioned pre-break, this is a little bit longer. We gave a in-depth presentation to the Ward 7 councillors about where we sit with North Park. And I thought, given the new board members, it'd be really good to bring that forward, especially since Diamond Schmidt, our architects, did some new drawings for us. So I'm excited to bring that forward. But just an update, North Park is currently in progress. We do have a selected contractor, and we are in the negotiations with that contractor. But design tweaks that don't impact build are ongoing. So just a high-level review of the current plans. So the new permanent 16-mile library will be attached to the existing 16-mile sports complex. There will be a library as well as a rec center. What's in yellow on the right-hand side of my screen is the library. And where 7 is, that's Nayagawa. And we're facing north, just to give a brief orientation for you. So we are excited to be at the end and be one of the focal points as people come in off the parking lot through the entranceway, which is 10. They come in our doors. 5 will be our creation zone. It'll be modeled after our Glen Abbey creation zone, which has been quite successful for us. We will also have 6 is our programming room. Just up from 6, which isn't labeled, is actually our Tinker Lab, which will be our designated school-age creation zone. We're really excited. That'll be the first one for us. We're really excited to bring that to life. 7 will be a children's outdoor space. If COVID taught us anything, it's the importance of an outdoor space. We introduced one at Glen Abbey last year. That's more of a multi-use space. This one will be a dedicated, primarily used for children's, mostly because where you're seeing 8 will also be exterior space with tables and chairs. That'll be for the full facility, so we will have ability to potentially do programming out there. But we did want a designated space, particularly with a fence, because kids can be runners, and Nayagawa is right there. 4 is the children's area, and 3 is the stacks, which, when I talk about design tweaks, a lot of it is retweaking the collection size, where the stacks are going, the angles of the stacks, and you'll see some of the ideas that we're playing with in order to just make it feel as welcoming and inviting as possible and not a wall of stacks. There is an upstairs component to it, but it is just an around. The cross, it overlooks the first floor. 5 is a quiet study area. 4 will be kind of a magazine, newspaper reading area. There are 3 small meeting rooms up there, between 2 and 6 people in those spaces. And 9, we're really excited about. It'll be a video audio cove that we're excited to do programming with. It will be accessible for particularly entrepreneurs who want to do marketing or advertisement, people who want to do podcasting. A wide variety of different activities will be available through that. So if you're in the parking lot and you're walking, so Nayagawa is on the other side, so that's just this view. So our library is at the end. It is envisioned to be almost a glass box, which will be absolutely beautiful, and I think allow people who walk by to really see the activity that's going on in the library, especially being at the end. And this is if you're on Nayagawa, looking towards it, the back of the building. You can see a little bit of the children's space, although that wouldn't be the fence that we'd be using. But that's the area that it would be. And here, you can see a little bit that we are playing with angling the stacks a little bit, so as you walk in, you get the view to the windows, and it's not just a wall of stacks. So those are some of the tweaks that we're currently playing with, as well as the children's area and creating a visual kind of draw that as soon as you walk in, kids know that's their area, they can run towards it. It's really exciting. We're hoping to actually make that a little bit of an interactive piece. But again, we're still working through some of those pieces. Just a little bit of a different angle for that, but it gives you more of a view of the upstairs and where those 2 meeting rooms would be, and into the reading area that would overlook the main facility. just a hint of people walking through the front door and the service desk that would exist, as well as the checkout stations. So really, it's meant to have a wide variety of different areas to meet the very varying needs of the community up there. So there'll be a comfortable reading room, a natural light upstairs, fully equipped children's area with elements of play and seating. There'd be study and workspaces, including different tables, a laptop bar, a quiet study room, and meeting rooms, the Creation Zone, the Tinker Lab, the Photo Video Cove, and the outdoor space. For those who may not be familiar with Creation Zone, it's basically a makerspace, which is a hub of innovation and creativity. We provide a mix of more traditional makers, tools such as button makers, sewing machines, those aspects, as well as laser cutters, 3D printers. So we haven't decided what's going in this space quite yet, other than we have, for the first time, designed better ventilation for that. It gives us more ability to introduce things like the laser cutter. We do have a laser cutter at Glen Abbey, and we actually bought one that had an attached air ventilator, and it kept breaking, so we eventually had to retrofit that space. So we're excited to actually build this in to give us more flexibility in the technologies that we want to bring in. But we're looking to really determine what goes in there as we get closer, because things change so rapidly. The Tinker Lab, as I said, we're really excited about that. It's for children, school-age children between 5 and 12 with STEAM-based programming. It's based on a model that exists at Edmonton Public Library, where they have a designated space that we can program out of, but also that we call it, well, I call it like guerrilla programming. So you can put a challenge up on a whiteboard and have all the equipment out, so it doesn't necessarily need to be staffed. So kids can go in and put together a Lego machine to meet a challenge, and then kind of participate. So there's both planned activities, but also the ability for people just to walk in and explore all the different kind of technologies and toys that are in there, and build up those skill sets. The Photo Video Cove, again, the space is designed to facilitate the creativity of podcasts, videos, and photography. We're really excited about that. We've got some really great ideas about potential partnerships with potentially Sheridan, about how we can bring in students to maybe help us really bring this to life. As I mentioned, the children's outdoor space, this is Glen Abbey, but the really idea being that we would have that outdoor space where we could further expand story time out there. We've had huge success with club car races at Glen Abbey, so we're excited to bring that up to 16-mile bubble time, to really not allow children the space to not only do their fine motor skills, but their gross motor skills, and outdoor spaces are much better to help accommodate that. We'll have a number of self-serve options that we have in our current branches. There'll be public access computers. We're also going to move away to a certain degree from the number of public access desktops that we have and introduce more laptops. We do have laptops at some of our branches now, but it is managed by staff and can be quite labor intensive as a result of that. So we are looking at exploring loanable laptop kiosks that will do a lot of that work for us. So we're excited to introduce that. There'll be food lockers, the children's area. And of course, we're still working on what the collection will be, but there will be a large focus in multilingual up there, as well as looking to grow our library of things, including our sports kits, our connection kits and EnviroPacks, as well as our provincial and local passes. So moving on to the Parks, Recreation, and Library Facility Master Plan, this process is well underway. We actually launched the marketing campaign for the public survey and focus groups this week. You may have seen it. Feel free to participate that as individuals. But as you all know, the board consultation for this is scheduled on May 4th at 6 p.m. So I'm very excited for you to participate in that process. Meetings with counselors have been happening through April and May, as well as focus groups, our community partners, and different community groups in the area that we have identified is being consulted and will all be amalgamated into the plan. So During my report about ebooks, I mentioned the Canadian Urban Library Council a number of times. So the Canadian Urban Library Council consists of CEOs of all urban public libraries. So that would be any municipality over 100,000 would have a seat on CULC. We meet biannually, twice a year, in the spring and in the fall. We do have a meeting coming up in May. That'll be held in Toronto. Some of the key topics that we'll be talking about right now are safety and security. That is a major topic happening across the board. At our last meeting in the fall, a safety and security working group was established, and they've been working hard to identify best practices and trends and recommendations. So we're excited to hear about what they have to bring forward to the group. Also, I'm hoping to get an ebook update that I'll be able to bring back to the board after the fact. So this happens at the beginning of May, so I'll bring that back to the May board meeting. I always make sure to bring an update about what was discussed.
Derek, can I ask you to pause for 1 second? The previous report on 16 Mile Creek was quite a robust report. I just want to see if anybody has any questions before we move on too far, because it's a big deal what we're doing up there. Celso?
It looks like it has completion date Q4 this year? Is that what it said in one of those?
Well, it's listed as Q4 of 2024.
2024.
2024.
Okay. All right, so I misread it. Thank you. Yeah.
Unlikely.
Yeah.
But fingers crossed.
It's the world of public
Well,
works.
as soon as I have updated timelines, because we're in negotiations with the contractor, once that's completed and we have they've brought forward a timeline, I'll come up with an updated kind of timeline. But right now, the original date was Q4 of 2024.
So the construction costs are not in the library's budget, but the staffing will be, correct?
Correct.
So we should expect when it's time to do that budget, whenever that happens.
Yes. Yeah.
We'll see a bump there, right?
Yeah. You will now. So the building is not in the library's budget. The collection and the furniture is currently in our capital budget. So you will see that next month when we bring the budget. You'll notice that budget line because that is solely our responsibility. So we did separate that out. It gives us a bit more control and be able to monitor it rather than it being in a big
Makes
bucket
sense.
with the town. Yeah, and so we did, as part of the 2023 budget, we did do forecasting of what we thought the costing would be for operations for the new branch, which we will update as part of the 2024 budget. And by that point, we should know whether or not what needs to be part of the 2024 budget, what needs to be part of the 2025 budget, whether or not we're going to open half a year, and then you see that kind of costing. So yeah, that'll come as a lot more discussion about the operational costs will happen as soon as we start talking about the 2024 budget.
And it's probably important to mention too that a lot of that budget, that operating budget will move over from the temporary 16 Mile Creek branch as well.
Well, that's not entirely, the board has to make a decision about what to do with the temporary branch. So as we move forward, and this is one of the things that the master plan will identify is whether or not we want to move the current branch to a new location to continue to operate, whether it wants to move to Palermo or another location that's underserved, in which case those costs would not move.
But that wouldn't be an audit, that wouldn't be an immediate thing. That would be a couple years probably between,
Well, that's I think up for discussion, but yes. If that discontinues for any period of time, then that would shift, and then we have to decide what that kind of happens.
And just for my own learning here, when there's a big bump in budget because of new facility, does it go up to the town for approval? Because that's where,
The town does all the capital.
And the operating.
and the operating, Thank you.
But in terms of, owning and operating the facilities, that is a town responsibility. So essentially the town provides the facilities and, builds them and basically provides them to the library as part of our service level agreements we have with the town.
But the library board does approve the budget to go to the council for recommendation, makes the recommendation that it goes to council for approval. So it gets formulated here and then goes to the budget committee for review.
Staff, board, council.
Yes.
Basically but you'll see that there'll be a budget direction each year, which will tell the staff what to work towards because of the town's overall financial situation, and then they have to work towards that.
And do we do 3-year projections or 4-year projections that the town looks into, or that's not?
For capital, it's 10-year.
Capital, yeah, capital's a long term. So all the capital on this has already been, we've already approved
Accounted
that a
for.
while ago, yeah. But on
But
operating, it's
OpEx, no
annual.
matter.
And again, at the next board meeting, when we have the broader financial report, you'll see that the 10-year capital, and maybe we can go through some of those. As part of that, I'll make a note.
Is the budget in the orientation package for new board members?
I think so.
Okay, so if you.
It was the audit, though, I think, from last year, though, wasn't it?
Well, even if the audit's there, you'll see
Yeah.
the capital, you'll see
Yeah.
the capital forecast, and you'll see 16 Mile Creek is already incorporated there, the collections budget, all that sort of thing, so.
Yeah. Yep. Okay.
Oh, sorry, any further questions on where we are up to this point? Very exciting, thank you for that. Let's move on.
So Sheridan, on Wednesday, myself, Joe, and Jennifer, and our manager of technology, Monica Sokol, took a tour of the Center for Mobile Innovation, which was really, really interesting. So Sheridan has a number of different centers of innovation, and the head of the mobile innovation came to the town to speak with the senior leadership a couple weeks ago and invited us all over for a visit. I, of course, jumped at the opportunity to go see what they were about. So the Center for Mobile Innovation creates innovative solutions to industry-relevant challenges in mobile health in close collaboration with industry, community, and academic partners. They're really interested in mobile machine learning, wearable computing, Internet of Things, virtual reality. They're doing amazing things. And we're already starting to have conversations about how we can collaborate. They're very interested in research projects. They're actively looking for new research projects. So we had so many ideas that we're gonna have to narrow them down a little bit, and then have discussions with them about what they are interested in pursuing as research, as well as what they think students might be interested in. And there are opportunities for us to work with them in terms of doing research with grants, and we think it's a really interesting idea to explore, so there'll be more information coming with that as we kind of have those conversations.
It's great to see Sheridan becoming more community-focused.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They used to be an island unto themselves, and now they're really, truly becoming part of the Oakville community once again, which is wonderful to see.
And I think some of it is being driven the way Ed Sykes, who is the director of this center, was speaking to, is that there's been a shift in how the grants work. So the grants now allow for work with nonprofit, whereas before they wouldn't. So now that world has kind of opened up, and they're very driven by social good and how their innovation centers can help with social good, which we were very excited about. So community play nights are back. This is a partnership that we do with Recreation and Culture. These are free monthly events sponsored with the Rec and Culture Department, offered at different facilities throughout the town. This is the first time we've participated, so we're excited to be part of this. We had our first one at QEP. The next one is happening at Glen Abbey on April 28th. So it's a really great partnership, and we're excited to be part of that. We also are starting to do sign language programming, which has been extremely popular. We launched it in January with the Community Oak Park Family Network to offer residents free introductory sign language lessons. We've had 26 lessons so far with 258 total participants with really lengthy waitlist. So we're really excited to see the community interest in learning this new language, and we're really excited to see where we can take this partnership. So just highlighting some of our April and May programs. As we talked about back in March, we did do our Native Wildflowers Seed Ball, which you can see up in the corner there, that people could kind of build a ball and throw it out into the wilderness and kind of create wildflowers that would help our local pollinators thrive. April is Poetry Month, and there are a number of events that were happening throughout the month to celebrate that. Greta Thunberg is our April's Big Dreamer. So we pick a public figure every month and just kind of do programming around that to kind of highlight what's possible in the world for children. May is Mental Health Bingo, and OPL will kick off with a bingo challenge for adults and teens to help them prioritize their well-being. So if anybody's interested in participate that, keep your eye out. And we are hosting a teen carnival at White Oaks on May 16th to celebrate Youth Week, which we're very excited about. We've had some really great programming successes with teens at White Oaks, and we're really excited to just keep building with those relationships. So welcome Baby Kits. Number of board members, this has come up a number of times, but we are launching it in May. It will launch on May 3rd. We've been trying to get this launched for a while, but Halton Health has had a number of challenges that they had to overcome in order to help that. But I was there last week for the picture below and some of the media release stuff. So look forward to that. Basically what the program is any baby born at the Oakville Trafalgar Memorial Hospital will be given a certificate, which they can come to their local branch and exchange for a bag that has a wonderful board book in it, as well as a growth chart and a bunch of different resources for new parents to really get them off to the best start possible. So we're really excited with that. The nursing team in that ward is also really excited for the project. So I will keep everybody updated on how that goes once we start it on May 3rd. They also get their own, we customized the library card, so all the new babies get their own special library card. So based on the recommendation for last month, you will be receiving your tax bill, and with that, you will see a promo for the library. We worked with them to turn that around relatively quickly because the distribution starts to go out May 17th. We did actually put a unique code to the QR code as well as the listed URL, so we'll be able to track how many people actually go to that particular website to see the impact that this avenue has had. So we'll report back on that, but we're excited to see whether that draws people into our site to learn more about us as they pay their taxes.
You don't spoil it by saying that.
Well, get their money's worth.
Yeah,
Right?
it's true, they do.
Any questions?
Questions, comments? Not seeing any. That sums it up. Thank you very much. Can I get a motion to receive the CEO's report, please? Thank you very much. Rod, I've still got the balance of the meeting to remember everybody's name. Seconded by Rebecca. Thank you very much. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much. Okay, members of the board, we do have to go in camera for 2 discussion items, but I'm going to suggest that we move up the election because we're going to lose our vast audience, our vast television audience. So I'd rather do, because that's a public thing, I'd rather do that now, and then we'll go in camera and then we'll come back basically just to adjourn. Is that satisfactory, everybody? Okay. So today you learned why having a vice chair is important, because sometimes the chair gets stuck in traffic or is not available. And we've used the vice chair very effectively in the past to spell off those sorts of occasions. So we do need a vice chair. And I would look for nominations for a vice chair that would serve for the term of council. So it's basically you're committing yourself, barring a resignation, but you're committing yourself for effectively the next 3 and a bit years to the responsibility. So I can go with volunteers, or I can go with the nomination. I know there's one individual that's interested in it, so for sure. But pardon me. So we have a volunteer, but I do need somebody to nominate Andrew. Okay, so thank you very much. He's been nominated and seconded. Wonderful. Anybody else interested?
Sorry, just who seconded?
Oh, I'm sorry. It was seconded by Meredith, and it was moved by Rebecca.
Perfect, thank you.
I'm almost there. Just don't change your chairs next time, please. Going twice for more nominations? 3 times for more nominations? Can I get a motion to close nominations, please? Motion to close. Motion to close, Celso. Seconded by? Sorry, Avis, you're the only person I haven't had any problem with of the new people tonight. Now I just blanked. All in favor of closure of nominations? That's carried, so congratulations, you are acclaimed as our new vice chair. Thanks, Andrew. You have 20 minutes for your acceptance speech. Okay, members of the board, we are looking now for a motion to go into a session close to the public. And this is by virtue of the Ontario Municipal Act. And it is based on 7.2 and so I'm misunderstanding Jessica's notes here, but basically we're going to deal with personal matters about identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, and a proposed or pending acquisition or disposal of land by the municipality or local board. So those are the reasons we're going into closed session. Can I get a motion to do that, please? Thank you, Bill. Seconded by Andrew. All in favor? Okay, this meeting is going into closed session. Members of the public who are watching, we will return into public session when we're done our closed session, but there's no other new business. So if you're saying goodbye for the night, thank you for joining us on YouTube. And we're very grateful for the interest of our customers and our fellow citizens and taxpayers for your interest in library board activities. And we look forward to you returning to watch us again next month. And if you ever have any questions, never hesitate to reach out to myself as the chair or to the CEO or to any of our board colleagues. With that, this meeting is now moving into closed session. Can we rig the room for a session closed to the public, please?
I can move my hands because it's not so hot. Yes, it works. Most important that it works for the recipient. But yes, I think we have,